Welcome to the Irish NFL show in association with QuinnBet. We're in the lazy QuinnBet, misnamed the sponsor. Always a great start. We're in the lazy, hazy days post Super Bowl and pre-draft. We got the combine coming up in a couple of days' time. We do also have the free agency rumor mill really starting to heat up. It's a couple of weeks yet until the league year starts. That's March 12th. So that gives you 48 hours prior to that if you want to wind the clock back, where teams can negotiate with any player who's about to become an unrestricted free agent. So that's when all the deal making will be done. Also, of course, teams are going to be considering whether they need to move players on because they need to free up cap space. So that applies to the likes of Aaron Rodgers or Deebo Samuel, for example, who aren't free agents, but who are quite likely to be on the move. So we thought we'd take a sneak peek at some of the more exciting players who will be up for grabs and speculate on where they might end up. The best or most likely landing spots for those players. It's Ciaran O'Donovan, Ciaran Boyle, Shane Brennan, and Brian O'Leary with myself, Conor Brophy. A full house. We're not doing too badly considering this is supposed to be the off season. Just goes to show you how committed we are. Ciaran Boyle, I might just start with you because the combine gets underway on Thursday. Is it Thursday, the 27th of February? It's always a lot of speculation at this point about who will actually show up and who won't. And we know Shedeur Sanders isn't going to be there, for instance, which, is not unexpected because a lot of players who feel like there's nothing to be gained in terms of improving their draft stock, and it may all be downside if they don't bench or run or whatever as quick or as powerfully as they're expected to do. They decide to sit out the combine. We saw Caleb Williams and others last year among the top 10 draft picks ultimately decide it wasn't worth their while to attend. But it is still, it's a place where GMs and where scouts get to enjoy the best of the college talent. And there's always a couple of guys who show out. You're the one who keeps the closest eye on the available talent. Who are you looking forward to seeing, and who's going to make our eyes pop and maybe change their draft evaluation in the process?
Yeah, I'll drop a couple of names in there. I think the one of the advantages, just to start off with, one of the advantages of the college playoff kind of atmosphere and that kind of end of season, time of the year is it gives some of these players that, they've made their name already in the playoffs. I mean, if we remember the Texas Arizona State game right at the start of the playoffs, we all remember Cam Scatabo running around with his head on fire. So he's done a lot of the work already. So that takes a lot of the kind of the heavy lifting out of the combine for a lot of players. Ashton Jeanty he just announced he'll be there, but he won't be doing any, measurable stuff. He'll be doing some sound bites and some interviews and obviously meeting with GMs and teams and stuff like that. And again, like you said, Sanders will be taking it easy. A lot of these guys have made their name pretty much in the last couple of months, and their star is rising. But as the question you asked was about some players, and I've picked a couple of players, about 4 or 5 players that may not be kind of household names now, but these are going to be people that you're going to be talking about in April and even in the off season. The Jared Verse type of players, players that weren't really on the radar at the start. So this, we obviously know about the quarterbacks, Cam Ward and Jackson Dart and people like that. I'm going to go heavy. I heard somebody say that this is not a star-driven draft or a star draft. It's more of a starter draft. So a lot of players are going to be, the guys I'm talking about are going to be either late first or, early second, and definitely going to be solid players in the league. So you got people like Mason Graham, who's a tackle out of Michigan, a huge guy. He's 6'3", 320. And just the measurables alone, he's an absolute monster blocking. People like him are, they're league ready, and they have been for the last, 12, 24 months. So keep an eye out for him. I've talked a lot about Tyler Warren. You've heard that. There's a guy out of Michigan as well. Michigan's going to have a lot of players in this draft, especially in the first round. Name is Colston Loveland. He's a tight end. Again, great pass catcher. Similar kind of ability to Tyler Warren, who we talked about earlier. And he's been talked about as, he could even be a top 15 pick. Cam Scatabo I talked about already. Jalen Walker is a pass rusher out of Georgia, and he's going to be a phenomenal player. I mean, a lot of these guys have so much skill and ability coming out of high school that their star is already on the ascent when they get into college. And you see, we've seen over the last couple of years players who didn't really mesh in their own respective colleges, like Jaden Daniels, who started at Arizona State, ended up at LSU. Shedeur Sanders, who started off in kind of Division II college ball and then goes to Colorado. But some of these guys I'm talking about are stone cold 5-star locks coming out of high school. Graham, and Jalen Walker, linebacker out of Georgia. He's going to be an absolute monster. So those are just some of the names I'm throwing around. I'll throw one more out. A guy called Omarion Hampton is a running back out of North Carolina. Similar measurements to Ashton Genty, a little bit taller, but I'm just going to give you a little taster of what's coming. Again, it's not, you've heard me talk plenty about it. The quarterbacks, I'm not really sold on. I think there's more value in the quarterbacks in the later, the third or fourth rounds, and that's where somebody like Jackson Dart has been talked about a lot. He might end up. But for me, the O line and the D line is going to be really, really well stocked in the first round in this draft. So just a little taste of some of the names I'm throwing out there. Again, we'll go into the more detail once we get to April. But looking forward to the coverage on the NFL Network, and just good to for you guys to get eyes on players that are have developed so strongly during the college years and are basically.
Ciaran, I'm just going to start calling the slot coming to the boil. These are the players that are coming to the boil.
I like it. Coming to the boil. Boom. Hashtag. Love it.
Excellent. Take it to the bank. So those are the players to watch. And as you say, I always think that's each draft has a theme. Like last year, we were looking at amazing wide receiver talent coming out. You guys, yourself and Brian got some great props off the Malik Neighbors pick, and that turned out to be an absolute gem. That draft came as advertised in terms of the wide receiver talent that was available this year. As you say, it looks like very much this is the draft to build in the trenches. So if you're looking at it from a team building perspective, it looks like the strong are going to get stronger because there isn't necessarily an absolute game changer. Reality can often be very different from the hype. We know that, but there isn't necessarily an obvious game changer coming in the first round this year. So it'll be about getting that top pass protector or that top edge rusher that may change the prospects of a team that's bubbling or not too far away from contending. Shane, let's talk about free agency. And we know as of today that the Rams have given Matthew Stafford permission to talk to other teams. I would start with the hypothesis that it's probably most likely that Matthew Stafford ends back in a Rams uniform next year. It seems to me that this is the team that came closest to beating the Eagles in the playoffs. We kind of tend to forget that quite quickly. No other team got as close to them as the Rams did in the business end of the season. The Rams are not that far away. Suffered a lot of injuries in the early parts of last season. Were very unlucky. Hung in the fight though. Got themselves to the playoffs, and they win their wild card weekend game, which they didn't even get to play at home, as we know, because of the wildfires. And then they gave the Eagles a hell of a game in the snow, where nobody was really giving them a chance. Stafford may not find as good a prospect of winning the Super Bowl anywhere else. I know a lot of excitement about the possibility of adding him into a lot of places that are QB needy, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting aspects to this. Firstly, the rationale behind moving on from Stafford. I know the Rams are a team who have shown themselves to be not slow when it comes to making decisions on moving players on. We saw that with Jared Goff, for example, before Matt Stafford came in. I know that was a product of a broken down relationship, but they had no problem from doing that. We see Cooper Kupp now has been, the Rams are looking to trade him. I'm not quite sure the rationale behind that because he's an incredible talent, but the Rams have obviously decided that they're looking to the future more than they're just looking at the 2025 season. And that kind of falls into the Stafford mode. He is 37. He's been playing excellently, and you can't really fault much of what he has done. But where I struggle with this more than the idea of Stafford moving on is who is the replacement? What is the other option? I like the idea that Aaron Rodgers is going to come into that situation is nuts. That makes absolutely zero sense to move on from a 37-year-old who's proven himself to be strong in the playoffs, who managed to get as far as beating the Vikings, as you say, in that matchup. You're replaced by a 41-year-old who is cooked, and then maybe have a young guy sort of playing in behind him. And of course, you look at the fact that, as Ciaran alluded to earlier, this draft isn't particularly quarterback heavy. There isn't a standout person that you can pick up in the draft. The Rams really need to pick up somebody on the offensive line for the draft more than anybody else. That option is out. So, what is the alternative option here? Is it Russell Wilson? Is it Sam Darnold? Who is the standout person that makes you think that Matthew Stafford it's time for him to be thrown to the curb right now? Like that's what I find very difficult about this. If Stafford is pushed along, or Stafford does feel like he wants to move his family away from Southern California, there's a lot of teams that would definitely be lining up for him. And maybe it's a weird one where a trade for a quarterback going in to replace him might have to be organized. But it really depends on Sean McVay's own personal relationship with a couple of the guys that he could pick out, because
well, I don't know if I would fully dismiss the Rodgers idea, though. I think that's really intriguing. Like, anybody who tunes in regularly knows I've no time for Aaron Rodgers as a person, but like Aaron Rodgers and Sean McVay, that is really exciting. If Aaron Rodgers, as we were saying in the WhatsApp chat, if Aaron Rodgers would actually listen to Sean McVay, which is a massive question, he seemed to have better ideas than Matt LaFleur most of the time that he was in Green Bay, or thought he did. Like, those two could win a Super Bowl together.
Well, so but before, because I know Brian has a point on this, what does bringing Aaron Rodgers into your dressing room do for the other young guys that are in there? Because we know that the biggest strength of the Rams organization is how good they are at drafting and developing young talent. So what does having Aaron Rodgers in that group do for you? Nothing. I'm totally against it, but I've been proven wrong by these old stars of the game before. So I think Brian has something to say in this.
It's something that we haven't considered, is that we've seen in the past where trades have happened, and initially we'd say, oh, that's a fantastic trade. Russell Wilson, everybody was waxing lyrical in Denver that they found the quarterback of the future. Well, quarterback that could get them over the hump and back challenging within the division and ultimately make the playoffs. And then when Aaron Rodgers went to the Jets, everybody assumed Aaron Rodgers was going to make the Jets a legitimate team and they were going to be in the playoffs. And sometimes after reflecting on deals, you say the team that moved them because there was a really rational reason behind it. And I wonder, Matthew Stafford played really well last year, but it strikes me as a bit odd, despite the scenario that Connor is alluding to, that inevitably he'll end up back there. Sometimes you got to be, you're playing a dangerous game here, because they are giving him the option to talk to other teams. What's to say he doesn't get a mind-dropping deal, or his agent comes back and says, you're not going to get that kind of money back in LA, despite the fact you want to go and play there. And he's probably looking at his longevity of his career, 2 or 3 years, astronomical money. I'll take the deal. The Rams then reluctantly take whatever's on the table from whatever team. And they may not have an option to get him back, albeit they have to trade him. But they could get to a situation where, once the relationship is good, it may not end up good, because maybe he's decided his head is turned because of the money that's on the table.
Yeah, no, this is true. Ciaran O'Donovan, NFC North-wise, the Sam Darnold sweepstakes are starting. The pot probably won't be quite as sweet there, unfortunately for him, because of how he finished the season, as well as he played as a body of work last year, and in large part completely completed his rehabilitation from the dark days of the past. Unfortunately, you got the collapse against the Lions and the collapse against the Rams as the most recent entries on his CV, which raised those unfortunate questions about what Sam Darnold's ceiling is, which appears to be, once he gets to the business end of the season, the ghosts start reappearing.
Yeah, I think he's really going to suffer from recency bias, having those performances in his last 2 games. I really felt for him, because this was a guy who was legitimately in the MVP or on the fringes of the MVP conversation with the stats he put up throughout the season, and he was fairly unflappable right up until that critical point. And unfortunately for him, it is the critical point. It was the money time. It was the time to earn his spot in the Vikings or in Minnesota, or really put himself in the shop window for a contender. Now he's going to have to be. He's probably going to have to settle for a lot less than he might have been looking at a couple of weeks before the NFC crunch games. I'm just looking at these quarterbacks that are up for grabs, we'll say, or that are looking to be in the market. I'm looking at who may have to contend with being a backup next year. I don't think that Sam Darnold fits into that category. I think he's proven, one thing he has proven is that he can be a legitimate starter in the league. And there's a long list. I have a list from the Giants right down to the Raiders. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's 9 teams, and I think he'd genuinely be a starter for at least 6 of the 9 that I have written down here. I think he's still going to have options. I still think he's going to be sought after. But looking at Minnesota, there's still a hole to fill here because there's no guarantees that JJ McCarthy is ready to step up and start. I mean, he's a rookie who hasn't seen the field. Essentially, he's coming into his second season. He's never had a meaningful snap in a regular season game. He's coming off a significant injury, and so regardless, Minnesota are going to have somebody on their roster to either compete with JJ McCarthy or to back him up. So I'm wondering, do the Vikings stick, and do they offer him a significantly lower package than what he might have qualified for earlier on? And is staying with the Vikings the best fit for both?
Brian, talk to us about the wide receiver market, because there's a couple of potential game changers who'll be available. T. Higgins probably top of the list, but Devontae Adams probably going to be somewhere if you think there's still a couple of bullets left in that gun. Cooper Kupp, as Shane was saying earlier, maybe one that the Rams will end up having to let go, depending if they do a deal with Stafford or they need to replace him with somebody who's also going to command serious money if they want to contend. You got Deebo Samuel, who's clearly going to be on the move, and potentially Keenan Allen from the Bears as well. There's a lot of talented receivers out there.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see who gets the money very quickly. I imagine T. Higgins will be highly sought after day one. That tampering period, we tend to see these deals rubber stamped within half an hour of the time kicking off. I wonder what deals are doing at the combine. T. Higgins, I still think T. Higgins has an opportunity to go back to Cincinnati. He'll be, obviously, Jamar Chase wants his money, and he's been a bit outspoken over the course of the last 3 or 4 days, or his agent has, so that will make things a little bit more precarious. In terms of the other guys, I think some teams will kind of take that approach of let's wait to day 2, wait day 3, and see can we get a bit of value. Like we saw Devontae Adams at the end of the season, really productive. Now you could argue he was back in the swing of things for Aaron Rodgers, but there's a few storylines around him potentially going back to Green Bay, which you could argue would make sense. They've got a young team there in terms of their wide receiver room. Maybe he's the guy. He's probably learned a bit since he left, and maybe he realized that, Green Bay was the place he should have remained in the first place. But there's an opportunity for him to go back there. The Cup one doesn't actually surprise me. I'm not surprised they're looking to move off him. I think his production levels came way down over the course of the season. They're a young team. I think they're trying to get even younger. I think they'll try recycling in the draft. And then you got Deebo Samuel, and I think someone will take a shot on Deebo Samuel. I think we could be here in the middle of March wondering why they've gone for Deebo, because it could be a team like the Falcons or someone who don't really need a Deebo Samuels in their team, but think he's the kind of player that will put them over the hump, get them back winning the division or the playoffs. It strikes me as he's the kind of player that some teams will go for, but it may not make any sense at the time.
Ciaran, there's a couple of good defensive players Ciaran Boyle, a couple of good defensive players available as well. In fact, all the excitement is over the offensive talent, but there's deals to be done here. I'm struck by something that Bill Barnwell said about how every team wants to be this year's version of the Eagles, but the cautionary tale being that even Howie Roseman took 2 swings and missed as well. Like, we forget, because nothing succeeds like success. He made 4 great free agency moves. He also signed Bryce Huff from the Jets, who went nowhere, and Devin White from the Bucs, who they had to cut. They gave him a $4 million deal. They ended up cutting him for Zach Bond, who was the cut price bargain of free agency last year. So it's there can be a tendency to have buyer's remorse for these sexy names, but you got potentially Talanoa Hufanga, Charvarius Ward. There's a lot of good talent available, a lot of good defensive back, and potentially a good couple of good edge rushers too. Jonathan Grenard, probably the pick of those who moved in free agency last year, who went from the Texans to the Vikings, with Daniil Hunter moving the other way. So we could see some very interesting moves here.
Yeah, there is a lot of kind of marquee names on star teams. I mean, just on the 2 Super Bowl teams we just had. Josh Sweat, he's up for it, and so Zach Bond. And then on the Chiefs side, you got Justin Reed. His contract is up too. So between, like you said, Hufanga, Chase Young is back out there again. He's probably going to land somewhere for a big buck deal. Dre Greenlaw, Nick Bolton again with the Chiefs. Charvarius Ward. A lot of really good players who are anchors. I mean, Nick. I talked a lot about Nick Bolton before the Super Bowl, calling him the Fred Warner of that defense. I mean, he's going to command a big chunk of money because, that's or even if the Chiefs bring him back, I mean, that's the great thing about both defenses with the Chiefs and the Eagles, they were primarily draft picks, whether they were 2nd, 3rd, 4th, up to 7th. And now the team has got they've got this far on, and I don't want to say minimum kind of contracts, but now this is the time for those players to kind of make hay, because they've earned their oats, and now's their time to get paid. Who else is yet? Stephon Diggs out there. I think we missed him as well on offense, but a huge amount of quality, pass rushers and linebackers too. So it's going to be the fun thing about free agency is who pulls the trigger the first, and who makes the big splash with the big deal, and who follows suit. And kind of similar to the way the quarterbacks have gone the last couple of years, with basically your average quarterbacks are going for 50-55 million deals. Where is somebody like Nick Bolton going to go if the Chiefs don't re-sign him? So it's going to be a lot of good fun to watch and a lot of content coming through.
Yeah, it's coming up very quickly. The rumor mill already starting to get into full swing, and we will be looking at every single twist and turn between now and the start of the league year, I should say, on March 12th, right here on the Irish NFL Show.